Here's a worry. Our tools historically have worked for us, but is there a flipping of incentives and do we now work for our tools? I used to say when I worked in marketing, Google's search algorithm is geared to finding the best content and the best UX for their users. Write the best content that helps people accomplish their tasks, and you'll succeed in the SEO race. That was me circa about 2012. This was solid advice in that era. I gave it to many different marketing and website clients. Write for humans, and the algorithm would reward you. Make your content useful and the algorithm would reward you. Have the best user experience and the algorithm would reward you. The tool worked for us. It was a symbiotic relationship. Google's nascent ad functionality benefited from being the place to find information. Users benefited and content creators benefited with larger audiences, focused and happy users, and a clear-cut path toward success. We all got what we needed out of the relationship. In other words, the incentives matched for everyone. The symbiosis was always a bit of a delicate balance. If you study nature, you'll know that any symbiotic network is a delicate balance. Drift too far in one direction or another and risk toppling the entire structure. Tech leaders no longer seem actually interested in that balance. They seem to want humans to work for the tools. Here's a quote from Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI. It would be impossible to train today's leading AI models without using copyrighted materials. And a quote from Matt Billman, CEO of Netlify. Platforms, tools, or frameworks that are hard for large language models and agents to use will start to feel less powerful and require more manual intervention. In contrast, tools that are simple for agents to integrate with and well suited for the strengths and constraints of large language models will quickly become vastly more capable, efficient, and popular. Now, those may seem pretty straightforward, but let's break down a few propositions from these quotes. Now, Altman's meaning is, I think, relatively simple here. The tool that I'm building won't work without your content, without all of your content. Billman's quote is perhaps a bit more nuanced, but really no better in the end. In its essence, it says the following things. 1. Agents and large language models need to be able to use your site or tool. 2. Sites and tools should be made easier for bots to use to be more powerful to their end users. 3. If the tools are more powerful, they will be more popular. Those propositions are stated relatively directly in that quote, but what logically follows from those propositions? I think there are two quiet corollaries. First corollary, if the AI tools are more powerful, users won't use your tool, their bot will. Users won't read your content, their bot will summarize it. And that leads to a second corollary here. If users only use their AI tool and it doesn't send them to your site or your app or your product, the AI tool user won't be your user. It won't be your audience. That person will be captured in the AI company's ecosystem. Their money, their attention, and their time, all in the AI ecosystem. Either way, the message on this is clear. Give AI your content. Give AI access to your tools. And in the end, let the agent and the AI company take the credit for your work. The incentives here, they no longer match. So I worked in newspapers for the first 6 years after I graduated college, about '06 through 2012. To put this time period in a little bit of context, Google's search algorithm still ranked partially based on the keywords meta tag in your HTML for about half of that time. And it was quite a time to be alive on the internet, a time when the article you wrote about a technological feature would probably have some random keywords about Britney Spears built into the HTML just to get noticed. Now, I grew very familiar with the nature of SEO while working on the web for an organization which made money off the discoverability of its content. News organizations, right? We were being given millions of views across all of our news outlets each month via search, specifically via Google search. Do you know what the takeaway from our executives and every other executive in the industry was? The takeaway was Google is stealing our content. Let that sink in for a second. Now, I was young and idealistic about the internet, and I literally could not handle this. It was, in my opinion at the time, ridiculous. We were literally generating revenue from the views that we got. Google was bringing us an audience for each and every story that we published. My, how the times have changed me in this regard. In today's ecosystem, I'd honestly be forced to agree with those executives. 40-year-old Brian is mature enough to admit that maybe they were right, but it's still incredibly painful for me to think about. Now, Google at the time wanted to make information discoverable, or at least searchable. If you've watched my search versus discovery video, linked up there or down there, you may know about my opinions on that distinction. But as time marched on and Google Ads became more important, and thus user engagement became more important, Google wanted fewer users leaving the search page. Now, it started as a boon for Google's search users. Search for a local restaurant, get a widget in the sidebar, nice and out of the way, with important information like phone number, address, and even a link to the website. Nice. But then we got featured snippets. Now, when you search, say, what is an API, you get an answer pulled and quoted from a website right in the results, with no real benefit back to the original author here. Then we got Google Shopping results. I started writing this script on a fresh legal pad that I acquired from a local Walgreens the morning I was writing it. Walgreens was on my way to the library where I decided to write for the morning. Now, I did a quick Google search to check stock. I wanted to quickly find the dedicated page on the Walgreens website. Instead, I found this. Yes, the page I was looking for is listed 3 times, but it's listed in a confusing mess of 6 other products. Those other products are from Walgreens competitors. All of these posts, including the Walgreens results in the grid, they're all sponsored. It certainly doesn't seem to be working for Walgreens. It seems not to be working for me as a user. It seems mostly to be working for the company selling sponsorships in the results. It's harder to get real views. It's harder to transfer the engagement to the individual. There's higher competition around products, even in branded search. And all of this is before the advent of the AI search summaries, which, when launched, initially had no attribution on the answers it gave. And even now, it's kind of unclear on a path of getting the users to the original sources for attribution. The algorithm once worked for us, both the creators and the end users. Then it became more important for Google to hold the attention to earn the money. This made the incentive structure flip. Our products, our content, our news exists now to help Google's product, not ours. Perhaps those news executives were right. And saying that, there's no real way around it. We do have to talk about capitalism in a video like this. In essence, the degradation of this symbiotic relationship can be laid directly at the feet of late-stage capitalism. The balance of power had shifted in the early 2000s as small companies were finally able to make money on the web, largely helped by early Google. But there's always a tipping point, and that brings us to another issue with the quotes from earlier. In this game, who benefits the most? Now, the last section covered search issues with one capitalistic problem. When multi-billion-dollar companies see a way to make more money, it's really, really hard for them to hold to their original values. If we help agents and invest in making things easier for them, who are we even helping? The agents aren't benefiting. They're not alive. They're not sentient. They're not actually intelligent. So who? Well, the multi-billion-dollar companies or the venture capitalist firms behind the billion-dollar valuation companies. They get user lock-in, as we've seen with the devolution of Google search. The social contract, in this case, can always be renegotiated. So let's move instead and talk about Altman's quote. We've got to give up all of our copyrighted material to achieve a great and glorious Gen AI world. A world where all the powers of creation are at the disposal of everyone. Look, Creative work is hard. I get it. I've always wanted to be, say, a cartoonist. I've wanted to be an actor. I've wanted to be a novelist. I've wanted to be a filmmaker. But honestly, I never put in the work to get good or even the effort to get mediocre at any of those skill sets. I get the allure of being able to type in a small prompt and get an artifact back. Comic art, landscape painting, cool background music, amazing video of an imaginary cityscape. But here's the thing about capitalism and creativity. Businesses do not want to pay for creative output. Ask anyone who has tried to make a living as a commercial artist. Pay is terrible, hours are long, and the work is constantly devalued. So imagine the joy when investors learned they could do away with those tiny payments to those pesky artists. That's where the VC fervor and the hype comes from. Not from giving these tools to artists or to the everyday person, but instead giving them to low-paid prompt engineers to lower the cost of creative output. Oh, and let's not even mention the software development side of the creatives industry. We've been making far too much money for far too long. Wouldn't it be better if a founder, investor, or a product manager could just make the next big thing without a team of expensive engineers getting in the way? There's $10 million in seed funding right there. But honestly, this isn't even the worst of it. The worst is that creation is a core trait of humanity. We seek to create. As we learn and level up our creative skills, we often find bigger and better applications for them. The AI scheme is to take the creative tasks away from humans so that we can be more productive. And while that may be an economic boon in the short term, it's a real problem in the long term as the creative skills of humanity are slowly removed. Now, I hear some of you cry out, or at least I hear the AI advocates cry out, that's hyperbole. We're not going to lose our skills. We're going to be keeping our skills as we go. Maybe. Though, of course, maybe not. It's perhaps too early in the current technology cycle for there to be a definitive study on AI's effect on humanity. Even still, we can look at something very, very similar. There have been a lot of studies actually on something called the Google effect. At its essence, the Google effect says that by offloading our data retention and recollection to the internet, our brains are worse at retaining and accessing information. Here are a couple of excerpts from an NIH study on the Google effect. Moreover, when people search for information on the internet while working on the internet, they are more likely to use the internet rather than their brain the next time they encounter that issue. Moreover, when searching for solutions on the internet, rapid responses, answers that are obtained more quickly, are more likely to be convincing. People feel more confident when working in an internet accessible environment, and Google effect is stronger for those who have previously used the internet. Now, that's not great. We've modified our neural pathways, and not for the better. We're not as good at the things that humans used to be good at as we once were. So while it's not yet studied, it does stand to reason that if we outsource our artistic, writing, music, and even coding skills, the parts of our brains that help in the creation process would slowly function worse and become dependent on those tools in the same way that we have become dependent on Google search. Not even to mention that if it's a quick response, it's more believable. And that's a whole other video about how much we are getting false information from AI. This is definitely not great for us, but it is definitely great for someone who sells the thing that we become dependent on. Definitely bad for core elements of our human nature. Definitely good for the pockets of billionaires. Now, the study also says that the more people understand this, the more informed they are, the better the decisions they can make for themselves. Quote, in addition, by examining the potential costs and limitations of the internet, individuals are in a better position to develop and modify the technology so that it is potentially more productive, less disruptive, and more consistent with the everyday goals and functions of human cognition. Now, since learning this, I even attempt, with any question that comes up during a day, minutes of thought to try to remember information rather than doing an immediate search for the information. It's honestly better to start rebuilding those synapses as opposed to just letting them continue to deteriorate. But those sorts of solutions assume people are able to come to that understanding. The companies working on this have invested billions. Kind of makes you think about the term dependent. We're dependent on their service. We pay them money for their service. They don't want us to think about this. Now, my point in all of this is that when people start telling you that you need to work for your tools instead of the other way around, you need to deeply inspect that. We have very recent examples of how this has worked. It always starts at democratization, democratizing powerful things, having the world's information at your fingertips, having the powers of creation, development, writing, video creation, animation, all at your fingertips. And so far, this ends with most of the benefits in the hands of large companies. When that happens, we lose the democratization. But with AI, we run the very real risk of losing the skills that make culture, the skills that benefit us all, the skill of creation. I hope we don't let them take that from us just to make us a little more productive. What do you think? Is this an overreaction? Does it matter? Can we stem this tide? What are you doing to improve yourself and not just what you produce? Let me know down in the comments. And until the next time we talk, try to learn something new, try to create something yourself, and I'll see you on the internet.